Welcome everyone, my name is Robert, and as you know, I'm the project manager at Sharpen AI. So in today's video, I would like to go over what do I actually do as a daily work in my company. Perhaps it's interesting for you as a client to see what happens behind the scenes, and maybe you're somebody starting out an agency and want to see how do we at our agency do the project management and how you could structure your own. Welcome to Project Management 101, and I like to divide project management into three sectors. First of which is the getting a clear vision of the project. So the first step is actually getting a vision for the project of what needs to be made and how it has to be made. And once that vision is clear, which was crafted together with the client, get the perfect project, then we have to find somebody who's capable of actually doing the project, aka a developer who has the capabilities, who has the skills to execute such a solution. So I have to find the right developer for the project, and once I find the developer, then all other part of the project management is project progress tracking, which basically takes up most of my day because I have to check up with the developers on different projects and see how they're doing, testing out their products, giving them feedback on what they have to improve and where the client would want improvement. Project progress tracking also includes the feedback from the client side. So we have to schedule meetings with the clients for them to give the testing rounds of the project we made and get their feedback, and then iterate that feedback into building something that the client is happy about. So this is the most time-consuming part of my day because, as you know, many projects are on the table and I have to manage all of them. But let's go back to the first step of project management, which is the vision of the project. So to go into more details on how I get the vision, how I get the clear vision of the project is pretty simple. We have calls with the client where we discuss the details, the nitty-gritties of how they want the AI agent to be, what they want the tasks to be, and all the nitty details on me to understand what is that we are actually building and what is the solution we are solving for. Because that's the easiest way to understand what you're trying to build, is to get the solution you're trying to solve for the client. Then you can even give suggestions on how things could be done better, and then you have a clear vision of the project. But that is only in your head. So if you have a project in your head, that's great. You can build the project, but as an agency who have a list of developers, who have a team of developers, we have to put it all on paper so the developer would understand what is actually happening. Because without it being on paper, where a person can read it and understand what is being built and what capabilities does the agent have to have, then the developer will be perhaps misunderstanding what I'm saying to him or her, will build something that is not that we actually or the client wanted. So putting it all on paper is extremely necessary and is the most important step of getting the vision of the project. Obviously, all of the steps are important, but you have to put your general effort, you have to put your effort into putting it all on paper, because that is the base. So if you're building a home, the base layer is putting it all onto paper. So how do we put it on paper at our agency? More specifically, how do I put it on paper? Is once I get the clear vision of the project from the client's side, I like to put it into a detailed outline. What detailed outline is, it has structured day by day on what features has to be built during which day. It is more comprehensive than just listing all the capabilities of the agent and what it has to do. It goes one step further, putting into a timeline of the project, because it has the days and the rough estimates of how long each feature should take. So this detailed outline is something that we send to a developer who I think is capable of doing the job, to see their opinion of it, how they see it, whether they are capable of doing it in the exact timeline or they need extended one, or maybe they think it's something that can be done in a shorter time. Then based on that, we iterate the detailed outline, and this detailed outline is later on put in the section of the project contract, but I will move to that later. I want to pay more attention to the detailed outline. So this is an actual outline we sent to one of the developers recently. And how is it structured? Firstly, the main task is to build a rough version in the first 3 days. That is something something that we aim for every single project. We want to build a rough version, and the rough version is basically a version where all the integrations are done. So from the technical side, it's all working. Whether the agent is actually speaking like the client wants or speaking in a human-like manner, having the salesy type of attitude, that is not something we aim for the rough version. Rough version is only to get the initial basic features into the agent so the client can see, hey, this is working, and then to not waste time on building something that we think is great and then we present it to the client and he says, I think this could be changed, this can be changed, that can be changed, and then basically that is doing all other steps all over again. We like to build a rough version, and then we hop on a call with the client where we discuss on how should the further steps be constructed and how they want to be certain things to be said for the agent. So in the rough version, as I mentioned before, we have the very basic. So for this one, we had basic sales skills, meaning that they just introduce themselves. Hey, do you want to buy? No. Okay, why? Yes, I want to buy. Okay, this is da. So this is the project. Pretty simple. Mentioned before, very basic sales skills. About answering questions from the PDF, that is basically whether the agent can retrieve actual knowledge from the database, from the custom knowledge base. That is like simple as that. And then the frequently asked question is the same thing as before, retrieving data from a custom-based knowledge base. That is to check whether we build the knowledge base in the correct structure and whether the agent can actually navigate through it. If not, then we have to iterate through it. This is just some basic feature that is necessary for the client's case. It has to capture the name and the email, offer time slots, like all of the technical details should be done in the detailed outline. And for this project, we were operating both in New Zealand and Australia. And for the rough version, we only needed the New Zealand time zone. There's no need to go that step further and put it into actually differentiating between Australia and New Zealand. Once we do not know, agent is actually something that the client wants to hear, wants to use, and only when that is confirmed, then we can move on to the later stages of adding the Australian time zone. So this would be about the rough version. The rough technicals are inside, and then after the call, we start to add those little features which make the agent even better. So let's say leaving the voicemail. Then if we move on to continue with the day 4, we're adding them to the call back later list. So if a person calls back, then the agent knows who's calling back. Then the next day we update the call flow. So the sales script, so it's actually a salesy agent. And that is where we build a prompt, test it out, and jump on calls with the client to see whether they see it as a salesy agent or they need some improvements. And then in the last step, we add the thing of having differentiating multiple time zones, because might it seem like a large technicality to do, it really isn't. And just adding some extra features on the agent. Once we know that everything works, we add this one little feature, check it out with the client, and then we are ready to launch. And this was something that else was implemented in the project about the reminder system. So that reminder system is built last once the agent is actually working. Obviously, in the real life example, some of these steps might be done earlier than others because client isn't available for the meeting. So why would we wait that day to do nothing if we can implement the, let's say, another feature with the Australian time zone? So it isn't actually in real life happening exactly step by step like this. This is like a detailed rough outline of how we would want the project to go. How it actually happens in real life depends on different scenarios. This detailed outline is here for the developer mainly. So the developer knows what is necessary to be built, as well as the detailed outline is later put on the project contract for the client. So for the client's contract. It's not seen on this Miro board right here, because it's not something that I deal with, that's somebody else on our team that deals with all the legality stuff. My part is to provide the detailed outline of what is to be built and the rough estimates of timelines. So once we have put it into a detailed outline and the developer is happy to build the project and knows he can do it in the timelines projected, we have to put a contract for the developer. So he is the one in actual legal responsibilities. So he's actually responsible for building the agent, and we can hold him reliable if something goes wrong. This is the basic template of the contract we use for all of our developers. And to go quickly through it, first, obviously, we have the general overview of who is the client, who is the developer, who is Sharpen AI, when is the project initiated, on what date. So all of this is basic stuff, and the rough version of what is to be built. Like what is the developer building. Then the next step is to list all of the capabilities of the agent. And to put it simply, this gives all the technical stuff the developer has to build. And instead of just listing, the agent has to handle objections. The agent has to have calendar integration. You have to go a step deeper and provide the backstory for each feature. So how is it actually being done? For the calendar integration, instead of saying, hey, the agent should be able to schedule calls, I, as the project manager, have to give a brief summary of how it would actually work based on the client's systems currently. So we would retrieve available class times from the calendar that they are using, the Go high-level calendar, via API, and then offer those slots in real time during the call. And then the agent should be also able to present one or more class times, so it's easier for the user to book. And a simple description is like that. The agent gets a clearer outline of what is the functionality and why it has to be implemented. Repeat myself again, if I just say, hey, the agent should be able to retrieve slots from the calendar and offer to the client. That is very vague, and you'll just have to hop on unnecessary large amounts of calls with the developer to discuss these features. So everything should be done in detail at the base layer, so there's no time wasted when the project is being actually built. So then we have all the other features like voicemail detection, the time zone awareness, and other necessary features for this exact agent. But this is, as I mentioned before, gets a better understanding for the developer of what needs to be built. Next step is to have the project timeline. This project timeline is simply the same document but formatted a little bit better, so it looks nicer in the contract. But what it does, it provides a brief summary of what needs to be done, and then lists all the features which need to be implemented during each day, or the time, like the duration of multiple days. As you can see here, it's the same stuff before, like capture name and email address. The agent captures customer email address, phonetics, and then it's just formatted nicer here. A small note is also included in the contract that's saying, hey, this is the estimated timeline. Some changes may be implemented or something, because not everything doesn't happen like a plan. That is for certain. So you can't expect everything to go smoothly or go as you planned before, because that is how real life works. Nothing goes smoothly. And once we have set up the timeline, we have to put a criteria on when the project counts as finished. To put it simply, this whole section says the project is completed when the client is happy. Only when the client approves the project and it has all the capabilities as listed right over here as the above section, then the project is finished. So we consider the project finished when the client accepts it. As this whole development process is a combined effort from our team and the developer, because we work as a team. We aren't some individual companies who outsource somebody else to build these projects. We are working as a team. This is just a way to hold each developer accountable for the project they're building, but we work as a team. So as a team, we want the developer to be happy as well. So we care about how they are feeling, and we can't just add extra workload to developer without them being compensated. So when the client is asking for additional features, we can't just say yes, collect the money, and then say, hey developer, you have to do all of this again, because as we mentioned before, this is just some anticipated timeline, so you have to add this feature, this feature, this feature. No, that is not what we do, that's not what I do, because I want to keep my developers happy, and they are they have to be paid for their work because they're actually putting in a great effort and they're making all of this stuff happen at great timelines. So if there are additional features, then we charge the client an hourly rate and we pass that hourly rate to the developer of ours. So they are getting compensated if there are multiple features necessary to be added outside of the listed capabilities before. That is what this section does. And deliverables is something that we expect from the developer to be given to us, to the client, and simply that is when we as Sharpen AI recognize that the developer has done his job. Like, we have seen him build the project works. Now the only thing left is for the client to accept the project and make some small tweaks to, let's say, how the agent is speaking. This puts everything into perspective on what are the different sections that needs to be built and how do they integrate with each other. And then the last part is basically just some legal stuff, obviously payments of how much we are paying the developer for such project and that we are paying him and the project is completed and the client has accepted that we pay him. Obviously we can do some exemptions of paying in advance a part of the project sum and then the rest after, but it really depends on the developer and the contract, on the situation the developer is in. Because if they need money right away, we're happy to give it, because with this contract, like, we are locking them legally that they have to complete the project, and if something goes wrong, we can take legal action to gain that money back. And the last part about confidentiality is just for legality. So the client doesn't run away with all the data the client gave us, and we can keep it safe and hold the developer reliable if something goes wrong or the data gets leaked from his end. That is for the legality, as mentioned here. Then the signature of the developer and my one. And then the contract is set and we have logged in the developer will be working for the client's project. But these two are the documents that should be used both internally and for contracts. But something that also has to be put on paper is the platforms that should be used. So when we're getting a clear vision of the project, from the client side, we have to understand what CRM are they using, what kind of databases are they using, and other integrations necessary. So I have to provide a list of involved platforms. So for example, we're using Go High Level, we're using WhatsApp, we're using NA10, maybe we need a bit of custom code. This is just for me to put on pen and paper or to keep it in my head. I like to do it in pen and paper, it's easier to remember. And then I have to keep these features in mind when I'm searching for the next step of finding the developer who's going to do the project and involving them in the project contract. Because not every developer is great at meta, not every developer is great at Go High Level. Some like to be more active in working with custom CRMs. So it really depends. And my job is to find the right developer, which is the next step. And finding the right developer is once again an extremely important part of the whole project, because the right developer can do the project in a shorter time and a higher quality than somebody who is learning about the platforms or somebody who is not so capable with one of the platforms, which will stall the project. Firstly, whether you actually have a developer or don't have one, that depends. As we have developers, we then look at who is capable of building such a project, and in case there is somebody who's not capable of building such a project, maybe there's a very interesting integration to be done. We firstly obviously chat with the developers who is capable of learning such system, who wants to learn such system. Most of the times they do want to learn and they're open for the challenge, because that is what developers do. They just solve technical problems and they learn pretty quickly on the technical aspects. But in case all of those developers are deployed in different projects, we have to find somebody else or teach the developer to do it. And since it's like a custom integration that I personally haven't worked with, and for me to teach him, I will have to learn on my own. That is something out of the way, like something that we try not to use really. This only happens for some small integrations let's say I have to help him integrate with WhatsApp, I can show it how to do it. I would not like to waste my time on this. This is something for the smaller agencies who are trying to or work on the projects themselves. So when these are not the options for you, then you simply have to find a new developer. Somebody who can do the job. You have to go to some agencies, steal their agents, or you have to go to these groups where there are people actively finding a job. But this whole process is something else. Like there's whole more detail for it. And if I go through this video, I think I will not bore you, but just overload you with information. So I would like to show it in another video, perhaps just after this one, like a week or so after this video drops. I will show to how do we find developers, how did we find our great team of developers using what is the method we use basically. So be tuned for that. Once we got the clear vision, once I found the right developer, gave him the project contract, then what else do I have to do is to do the daily tracking of project progress management. So how it looks in real life. We divide it into daily checkups and the client checkups. To move on to the daily ones, how does it usually happen? We have Slack chats with the developer. Show you an example right here. I'm actively testing out the agent, giving feedback on what should be changed. I'm saying also how it should be changed, not to, like if it's something I did before, when I'm developing a project, then I give an instruction of how to do it, just so the developer doesn't waste their time on some useless researching on how to do it. I'm here to give you the shortcut. If I know it, that is my job, because we are working as a collaborative team to make the client happy and build a project that actually works. So here's just a quick conversation of me testing the agent, how it should say the sentence instead, and give like actual feedback in quick bullet points of what needs to be changed. There's no need to write essays of I think this is something that we should have to change and give like reasoning. That is something that needs to be done. Put it into a quick bullet point. The developer understands it. Quick, easy. If they have any questions, they will ask something like a confirmation question. Okay, and should it pick up the age after this or before it? And a simple answer is yes. So it's clear communication with the developer, and so they know what they have to be building. And I mentioned before, we do the product testing. So we give feedback here, but before that, there happens to be product testing, as you can see here, making calls. Each time when the developer said, hey, I made these changes, I need to test it out and see whether the changes actually work and give feedback on them, or maybe some small tweaks that should be changed as well. So like this happens simultaneously. Through the day, I test the agent, send feedback, the developer fixes it, I call it back again, give another feedback. If something needs to be changed, small tweaks, give it back to the developer, and they change it, I call again, test it, see I'm happy. Okay, I'm great, we can then move on to the next steps of scheduling the call with the client. But what else happens daily is we are getting troubles, we're getting issues, because that's what happens in development. Always some new problems pop up, some technical issues, and I'm here to help. I also research how these problems can be objected, how can they be handled, and give suggestions to the developer. Perhaps they know a better way, maybe I know a better way because I have done something similar in the past, or some different developer has worked on a project where the same issue appeared, and I'm here to put it all together and solve issues together with the developer. So this also happens through Slack chats, and what we like to do once in a while is Google Meet calls with the developer. That is something we practiced more in the past, where we jumped on the calls and went live testing, so the developer can write the notes on what should be changed. But I found it to be easier to just call on my own, test the agent on my own, give the list on my own, and just give it to the developer of the list what I think should be changed. Because then we were spending a little bit more of time. Let's say we schedule the meeting, we have the call, and then I have to list everything that I did not like or something that needs to be changed. The developer has to write it down. They have to understand what needs to be changed, whether they understood me correctly, and that just takes time. So let's say half an hour is just poof, gone. And that is both gone from my day and from the developer's day. We do not want that. Why would I waste those 30 minutes if I can do my testing on my own in 10 minutes, write what I think should be changed, and then send it to the developer who gets a clear vision. And I think it's a lot easier to do that, but we still like to hop on Google Meet calls when we are doing some kind of troubleshooting to brainstorm something that should be done differently and come up with a solution for it. But this is what I mainly do daily. I hop on Slack chats, I talk to developers, I do the test calls, I do the test chatting, and I communicate with developers to see everything in progress. And all of this doesn't happen only in my mind. All of this is also documented in Notion. You can do your project management how you want. You can just simply use a folder on your computer, but I like to do it in Notion. Once this is working, we want to present it to the client. We schedule a client checkup meeting. That is something I schedule, and this is only happening after the rough version is built, and that takes those 3 days or 4 days. And after that, that is just once every 2 days where we have made the changes, hop back with a call on the client and have them tested out. In the checkup meeting, there's both the client, me, and the developer present. So I'm mainly communicating with the client, see all the issues we had, and the developer is speaking more about the technical stuff, or maybe troubleshooting if the client encountered an error while testing it, and seeing on the back end what is happening. So that is the role of developer, role of me, and the role of the client who's just testing. In the Google Meet itself, it doesn't have to be Google Meet, obviously. It can be any online meeting, maybe even in person. We just use Google Meet. The client is live testing the calls, so both me and the developer can hear what is happening. With the agent, we can see, we can make notes, just like I did before. I make those notes for the client. We get the honest feedback from the client as well. They quickly call the agent. They say, hey, it's speaking too fast, it's saying the date's too slow or something. I write it all down and put it into a chat and a document for the developer so he can continue working at it. These Google Meets usually take 1 hour. They can take less, they can take more, but on average, it's an hour-long testing. Actually get a feel of the agent and find some bugs that we were not able to find with the developer. Because you have to understand, when we are working with international clients, me and the developer are from different regions than the client. So a client who in this case was operating in Australia and New Zealand, that is something like we aren't that familiar with the culture over there. There can be some cultural differences, there can be pronunciation differences, and that is something that personally me and the developer cannot really test. That is why we need the live testing from the client, who's saying the locations differently, who's saying them in the additional, who's saying like in the local accent and everything. That is why the client also needs to be tested. That is why the client also needs to test the agent itself. And once the client is happy, we are launching the project. And then something that I did not really put in the Miro board over here, there should be another step of me where I check up on the launch of the project. Mainly developer checks on it. On the technicality side, I just see whether it's working and whether there are any issues and communicate with the client. So that is it for project management and what I do daily. I know the technical stuff of every project, what is happening at each stage, but also my job is to manage everything, to be the communication layer between the developer and the client, to keep them updated on what is happening. I'm the one who's putting the project onto paper and finding the right person to do it. So all of that, the fulfillment side is on my shoulders. That is what I do at the agency mainly. Obviously there are some bits and bobs that I do on other daily work, but this is the core operation of my daily work at Sharpen AI. I hope this was pretty insightful to you, whether as a client or somebody starting up an agency. And if you're starting up an agency, then make sure you have these systems in place from the day one, because then you will be more familiar with them. And once you onboard an actual developer, you will show them proof of what you did before, and they will better understand of how you operate and what are your so basically how you operate and what needs to be done, what is your work ethic. Thus, that is it for me for today. So thank you for watching, and be keen to wait for the video of how I explain how do I and Chris finds developers at our agency. So thank you, and see you in a week or so.